Welcome back to Neighborhood Nightmares, where we share incredible true stories about property disputes that turned ordinary neighborhoods into battlegrounds. Marcus Reynolds had always been the kind of person who preferred finding peaceful solutions to life's challenges. For nearly a decade, he had lived contentedly in the prestigious Oakwood Heights community, where his reputation as a retired military intelligence officer who now worked remotely as a cybersecurity consultant made him both respected and largely left alone. That was until his calculated decision to block the HOA security patrol's newly established route turned an ordinary neighborhood dispute into an escalating war of wills that would expose corruption at the highest levels of the community's management. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Living in a corner house at the intersection of Maple Drive and Evergreen Lane, Marcus had meticulously maintained his property since moving in after his military service. His home wasn't just a residence, it was a carefully crafted sanctuary, where every security camera was strategically placed, every lock was military-grade, and every sightline was intentionally designed. Years of intelligence work had taught him the value of preparation and awareness, habits that had served him well in civilian life. The Oakwood Heights community was known for its manicured lawns, strict regulations, and the supposedly top-tier security service that justified its premium HOA fees. Marcus had never minded the regular patrols before. In fact, as someone who understood security protocols, he had initially appreciated them. The guards would make their rounds at predictable intervals, maintaining a presence that kept the neighborhood safe without being intrusive. What particularly suited Marcus was how the previous security team respected boundaries. They understood that their role was to protect, not to pry. The original route had them patrol the main streets and common areas, maintaining a professional distance from private properties unless specifically called upon. This arrangement had worked seamlessly for years, creating a balance between security and privacy that benefited everyone. However, everything changed when Sentinel Security Solutions took over the contract 3 months ago. The new company, led by their aggressive chief of operations, Victor Knox, immediately implemented what they called enhanced neighborhood surveillance protocols. These protocols included more frequent patrols that now cut directly across private properties, including a new route that passed through Marcus's side yard every 2 hours. At first, Marcus had attempted to address the issue through proper channels. He attended HOA meetings, submitted formal complaints, and even tried to reason with the security guards themselves. His military background and security expertise lent weight to his arguments about excessive surveillance and privacy concerns. But his professionally presented objections were met with dismissive responses and vague references to updated security requirements. What troubled Marcus most wasn't just the invasion of privacy, it was the pattern he began to notice. The new patrol routes seemed suspiciously focused on certain properties, including his own, while completely avoiding others. His intelligence training kicked in, and he started documenting everything: patrol times, guard rotations, and which houses received extra attention. One evening, while reviewing his security camera footage, Marcus noticed something odd. The guards weren't just patrolling. They were systematically photographing specific areas of certain properties, including his home office window. For someone with his background in intelligence operations, this wasn't just concerning, it was alarming. That night, as Marcus sat in his home office, surrounded by monitors showing feeds from his security cameras, he made a decision. If Sentinel Security was playing a bigger game, then it was time to make a move of his own. He would block their patrol route, not just to protect his privacy, but to force whatever was really going on into the open. Little did Marcus know that his simple, act of resistance would unravel a complex web of surveillance, blackmail, and corruption that went far beyond ordinary HOA politics. His military intelligence background had taught him to recognize patterns, but even he couldn't have predicted how his strategic blockade would expose a scandal that would shake the entire community to its core. What started as a dispute over a patrol route was about to become something much more dangerous, a conflict that would test not just his tactical skills, but his ability to protect himself and his neighbors from those who abused their power under the guise of security. The first sign that Marcus's blockade had struck a nerve came on a crisp autumn morning. He had spent the previous evening strategically positioning large decorative boulders along his side yard, all perfectly within HOA landscaping guidelines, each one carefully placed to make vehicle passage impossible while maintaining full pedestrian access. It was a calculated move, designed to be both effective and technically compliant with every community regulation. At precisely 7:15 a.m., the familiar black Sentinel security SUV approached his property for its morning patrol. Marcus watched through his security monitors as Officer James Parker, the most aggressive of the new guards, brought the vehicle to an abrupt halt. Parker's reaction was exactly what Marcus had anticipated. First confusion, then visible frustration as he realized the carefully arranged stones prevented his usual intrusive route. Initially, Parker attempted to maneuver around the obstacles, but Marcus had done his homework. The boulders were positioned with mathematical precision, leaving exactly enough space to comply with HOA landscaping setback requirements while making any vehicle passage impossible. After several failed attempts to find an alternate angle, Parker emerged from his vehicle, his face flushed with anger. Through his high-resolution security cameras, Marcus observed as Parker spoke rapidly into his radio, gesturing animatedly at the new landscape features. Within minutes, a second security vehicle arrived, this one carrying Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, Parker's direct supervisor. Marcus had encountered Mitchell before during HOA meetings. She was sharper than Parker, more controlled, and consequently more concerning. Mitchell surveyed the situation with calculated precision, her expression unreadable as she photographed the boulders from multiple angles. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't her thoroughness, it was the fact that she seemed more interested in documenting his home office windows than the actual blockade. This confirmed his suspicions that their surveillance had specific targets. By mid-morning, Marcus's phone began buzzing with HOA notifications. First came an email from the community manager, Claire Thompson, citing a need for emergency landscaping review. This was followed by 3 separate violation notices, each more creatively worded than the last, attempting to find some regulation his boulder placement had violated. But Marcus had spent weeks studying the HOA bylaws. His arrangements were impeccable in their compliance. The situation took an interesting turn when Marcus spotted Parker and Mitchell conferring with a third individual, a man in an expensive suit who had arrived in an unmarked black sedan. Through his surveillance system, Marcus captured clear images of their interaction. The suited man's demeanor and the way the security officers deferred to him suggested he was someone of significance within Sentinel Security's hierarchy. Using facial recognition software from his cybersecurity toolkit, Marcus began running a background check on the mysterious visitor. While the search was processing, he noticed something that made his intelligence training kick into high gear. The man was using a military-style hand gesture system while speaking with Mitchell, a detail that seemed drastically out of place for a civilian security contractor. By early afternoon, the community message boards were buzzing with activity. Several neighbors had noticed the increased security presence around Marcus's property. Some expressed concern about the disruption to the patrol schedule, while others particularly those whose properties had also been subjected to invasive surveillance, began sharing their own stories of uncomfortable encounters with the new security team. What truly caught Marcus's attention was a private message from his neighbor, Dr. Eleanor Chen, a retired forensic accountant. "Those guards aren't just looking for troublemakers," she wrote. "I've seen them photographing financial documents through windows. Something bigger is happening here." As dusk approached, Marcus's facial recognition search yielded results that sent a chill down his spine. The suited man was registered as Thomas Blackwood, officially listed as Sentinel's regional director. However, deeper digging revealed that until 18 months ago, he had been involved with a private intelligence firm that had been shut down for illegal corporate espionage. This discovery transformed Marcus's understanding of the situation entirely. His simple act of blocking a patrol route had inadvertently threatened something far more sinister than overzealous security measures. The question was no longer about protecting his privacy. It was about uncovering why a former corporate spy was running security operations in a residential community. As night fell, Marcus noticed the patrol frequency around his house had doubled. Every hour, either Parker or Mitchell would drive by, now forced to stick to the main road. Their apparent frustration at being unable to access his side yard only confirmed that something valuable had been disrupted by his blockade. Settling into his home office for the evening, Marcus began systematically reviewing weeks of archived security footage, looking for patterns in the guards' surveillance activities. He had a feeling that his decorative boulders had done more than just block a patrol route. They had forced the first move in a game whose true stakes he was only beginning to understand. The next morning, Marcus decided to implement his first phase of active intelligence gathering. Years of military operations had taught him that understanding an adversary's patterns was crucial before making any major moves. He began by adjusting his daily routine, appearing to leave for work at his usual time, but actually circling back through a neighbor's property where he had set up a concealed observation point. From this vantage position, Marcus watched as sentinels. Patrol patterns shifted in response to his absence. The moment they thought he was gone, both Parker and Mitchell converged on his property, systematically photographing every window and entry point. Their actions weren't those of typical security guards. They moved with the precision of people who had received specialized surveillance training. What particularly caught Marcus's attention was their focus on his home office. Using a high-powered camera with a telephoto lens, he documented as they attempted to peer through the narrow gaps in his blackout blinds. Their frustration was evident when the military-grade privacy film on his windows thwarted their efforts. Marcus had installed that film years ago out of professional habit. Now it was proving invaluable. Deciding to expand his investigation, Marcus began reaching out to his neighbors, carefully selecting those who had also expressed concerns about the new security team. His first stop was Dr. Chen's house, under the pretense of borrowing sugar, a cover that allowed them to speak privately in her kitchen. "They've been watching my home office too," Dr. Chen confided, her voice barely above a whisper. "At first, I thought I was being paranoid, but I've worked enough financial fraud cases to recognize surveillance when I see it." She showed Marcus her own collection of photographs, documenting strange angles of patrol routes that seemed designed to peer into specific windows of certain homes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus's next stop was retired Judge Michael Patel's residence. The judge had been notably quiet during recent HOA meetings, which, given his usually outspoken nature, had struck Marcus as odd. When they met in Patel's garden, carefully positioning themselves to appear to be discussing plants, the judge revealed something disturbing. "They've been following my daughter to school," Patel muttered, pretending to examine a rosebush. "Not obviously. They're too smart for that. But I've noticed their patrol car consistently takes the same route she does at the exact same time. When I tried to file a complaint, Claire Thompson told me I was imagining things." These conversations painted a troubling picture. Marcus began, compiling a list of targeted residents, and a pattern emerged. Everyone receiving extra surveillance attention shared one common trait. They all held positions or had access to sensitive information that could be valuable to someone with the right motivations. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had spoken with 7 different neighbors, each sharing similar stories of intrusive surveillance. He carefully documented everything, creating detailed maps of patrol patterns and timing logs of security activities. But it was a chance encounter with Tommy Zhang, the teenage son of a local software developer, that provided the most crucial piece of information. "I saw them changing out something on the streetlights last week," Tommy mentioned, while retrieving his basketball from Marcus's yard. "It looked like they were installing small boxes. Dad said they were probably just updating the LED systems, but I've never seen security guards doing maintenance work before." This detail set off immediate alarms in Marcus's mind. After Tommy left, he conducted a careful examination of the streetlights near his property. Sure enough, disguised among the normal hardware were small, sophisticated surveillance devices, the kind typically used for intercepting wireless communications. As evening approached, Marcus received an unexpected visit from Mrs. Diana Foster, the HOA board's secretary. Her nervousness was apparent as she stood on his porch, constantly glancing over her shoulder. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, "but something's wrong with the new security contract. The numbers don't add up, and whenever I try to access certain files, I'm told they're restricted for security purposes." Marcus spent the rest of the evening processing everything he'd learned. The surveillance devices, the targeted patrol, patterns, the financial discrepancies. It all pointed to something far more sophisticated than simple HOA overreach. He began cross-referencing his neighbors' stories, creating a detailed timeline of when the unusual activities had started. Just before midnight, while reviewing his security footage one more time, Marcus noticed something he'd missed earlier. During their morning inspection of his property, Mitchell had been carrying what appeared to be a signal detector, equipment that would be completely unnecessary for normal security patrols, but vital for locating hidden electronic devices or monitoring communications. The implications were clear. His simple act of blocking the patrol route hadn't just inconvenienced some overzealous security guards, it had disrupted a sophisticated surveillance operation. The question now was, what were they looking for, and who was really behind Sentinel Security Solutions? The breakthrough in Marcus's investigation came when he decided to apply his cybersecurity expertise to analyze the surveillance equipment he'd discovered. Using specialized scanning equipment from his home office, he detected consistent encrypted data transmissions emanating from the devices installed on the streetlights. The encryption protocol was military-grade, far beyond anything a typical residential security company would use. More concerning was the transmission pattern. The devices weren't just passive surveillance tools. They were actively scanning for specific types of electronic communications. Marcus recognized the signature. It was similar to systems used to intercept sensitive corporate and financial data. This explained why homes of residents with access to valuable information were receiving extra attention. During his morning coffee, Marcus noticed something odd about Officer Parker's patrol behavior. Instead of his usual aggressive posturing, Parker seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone and making frequent calls. Using a high-gain directional microphone, a remnant from his military days, Marcus managed to capture fragments of one conversation. "She's asking too many questions," "No, I can't access his network. The blockade is just the beginning of our problems." This prompted Marcus to dig deeper into Sentinel Security's background. His cybersecurity contacts provided him with concerning information. The company had been formed just 6 months before winning the Oakwood Heights contract, and its corporate structure was a maze of shell companies and offshore registrations. More tellingly, several of its listed directors had connections to defunct private intelligence firms. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had compiled enough technical evidence to confirm his suspicions. The surveillance network wasn't just watching the community, it was harvesting data. The pattern of targeted homes aligned perfectly with residents who had access to valuable information. Dr. Chen's forensic accounting work, Judge Patel's sensitive case files, and the Zhang family's software development projects, a crucial piece of evidence, came from analyzing the patrol route changes. Using mapping software, Marcus overlaid the new routes with known Wi-Fi networks in the community. The pattern was unmistakable. The routes maximized signal interception opportunities around specific properties. His blocked pathway hadn't just been a convenient passage, it had been a crucial signal collection point. Marcus's investigation took an unexpected turn when he received an encrypted email from an anonymous source within Sentinel. The message was brief but revealing. "Check Contract Amendment 23B, follow the money through Cayman First Holdings." This led him to discover that Sentinel's payment structure included substantial bonuses tied to what they called enhanced community intelligence gathering. Testing a theory, Marcus set up a honeypot, a fake network broadcasting innocuous but seemingly valuable data. Within hours, he detected multiple attempts to intercept the transmission, all originating from equipment matching Sentinel's surveillance devices. The sophistication of these attempts confirmed that he was dealing with professional intelligence gatherers, not ordinary security personnel. Later that evening, while reviewing security camera footage, Marcus caught something crucial. During a conversation between Mitchell and Blackwood, Mitchell had accidentally dropped a tablet. The screen was briefly visible to Marcus's cameras, displaying what appeared to be a target list of residents and their information priorities. His own name was near the top, likely due to his cybersecurity work. The technical evidence was mounting, but what truly convinced Marcus of the operation's scale was the pattern of electronic interference he detected around targeted homes. Using specialized equipment, he documented systematic attempts to penetrate home networks, intercept cell phone communications, and capture digital transmissions. The operation was professional, well-funded, and far beyond the scope of legitimate community security. Dr. Chen provided additional confirmation when she shared her analysis of the HOA's financial records. The security contract payments were being routed through a complex network of shell companies, eventually leading to an offshore account connected to a known corporate espionage operation. The money trail was expertly hidden, but to trained eyes, like Dr. Chen's, the pattern was clear. As night fell, Marcus began correlating all the technical data he'd gathered. The surveillance devices, patrol patterns, and attempted network intrusions painted a picture of a sophisticated intelligence gathering operation masquerading as community security. His blocked patrol route hadn't just interrupted their surveillance, it had exposed a vulnerability in their entire operation. Using his military experience and cybersecurity knowledge, Marcus created a detailed technical assessment of Sentinel's capabilities. The equipment they were using, the encryption protocols, and their surveillance techniques all pointed to a professional intelligence operation with significant resources. This wasn't just about community safety. It was about collecting valuable information from unsuspecting residents. The question now wasn't whether something illegal was happening, but rather how deep the operation went and who was really benefiting from the collected information. Marcus knew that his next moves would need to be carefully calculated. He wasn't just dealing with overzealous security guards anymore, but with professional intelligence operators who had significant resources at their disposal. Armed with his technical evidence and financial data, Marcus decided to pursue official channels before taking more direct action. His first stop was the HOA board's monthly meeting, where he prepared a comprehensive presentation detailing his findings about Sentinel's surveillance activities. He arrived early, setting up his laptop and documentation with military precision. The meeting room in the Oakwood Heights Community Center was unusually crowded that evening. Marcus noticed several unfamiliar faces, including two men in suits who sat quietly in the back, their attention fixed on him as he prepared his materials. Claire Thompson, the HOA president, seemed particularly agitated, constantly checking her phone and whispering with board members. When Marcus's turn to speak came, he methodically presented his evidence. He showed technical data about the unauthorized surveillance equipment, financial records revealing suspicious payment patterns, and documented instances of privacy violations. His military training was evident in his precise, factual delivery, designed to be impossible to dismiss as mere speculation. These devices, Marcus explained, pointing to high-resolution photos of the streetlight modifications, are military-grade surveillance equipment capable of intercepting private communications. They far exceed any legitimate security needs. For our community, he proceeded to demonstrate how the patrol routes had been specifically designed to maximize data collection from targeted homes. The response was not what he expected. Claire Thompson immediately cut him off, citing security protocols and confidentiality agreements. Board member after board member dismissed his concerns, their rehearsed responses suggesting they'd been prepared for this presentation. Even more telling was how quickly they moved to the next agenda item, refusing to address any of his specific evidence. Undeterred, Marcus escalated to the local police department. He compiled a detailed report, including Dr. Chen's financial analysis and Judge Patel's documentation of his daughter being followed. At the police station, he was directed to Detective Sarah Rodriguez, who initially seemed interested in his evidence. However, the detective's demeanor changed dramatically after she made a phone call during their meeting. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her tone notably cooler, "this appears to be a civil matter between you and your HOA. We don't have jurisdiction over private security operations." Her sudden shift in attitude, combined with the quick dismissal, suggested higher-level interference. Marcus's next attempt was through legal channels. He contacted several local law firms, but each time he presented his case, he encountered similar patterns of initial interest, followed by abrupt rejections. The final attorney was more candid than the others. "Look, Mr. Reynolds, I'm going to be straight with you. Sentinel Security has some powerful connections. No local firm will touch this case." Even reaching out to local media proved futile. Marcus arranged a meeting with investigative reporter Jason Martinez, known for his exposés on corporate corruption. The meeting started promisingly, with Martinez taking detailed notes and asking informed questions. However, the next day, Marcus received a terse email. "Story killed by editorial. No further contact possible." The systematic blockade of every official channel was itself revealing. It showed that Sentinel's influence extended far beyond simple community security. They had connections in law enforcement, legal circles and local media, a network of influence that suggested backing from powerful entities. During this process, Marcus noticed escalating pressure from unexpected directions. His cybersecurity consulting contracts began experiencing mysterious cancellations. His home internet service suffered frequent technical difficulties. Even his garbage collection schedule became erratic, small inconveniences designed to make his life increasingly difficult. The final confirmation of system failure came during an emergency HOA board meeting called specifically to discuss security concerns. Marcus attended, hoping to present additional evidence, but instead found himself the subject of the meeting. Claire Thompson, reading from a prepared statement, announced new community safety protocols that specifically prohibited any interference with security patrols, a direct response to his blocked route. More disturbing was the board's unanimous approval of increased security measures, including the installation of additional monitoring equipment throughout the community. When Marcus attempted to object, citing privacy concerns, he was informed that his speaking privileges had been suspended due to disruptive behavior. As he left the meeting, Marcus overheard a conversation between two board members that confirmed his suspicions. "Blackwood says we need to handle this quickly," one whispered. "The operation timeline can't be compromised." The other responded, "The partners won't be happy if we lose access now." That evening, reviewing his failed attempts to work through official channels, Marcus realized he had actually gathered critical intelligence. Each blocked attempt, each suspicious rejection, each mysterious cancellation formed a pattern that revealed the extent of Sentinel's influence and the scale of their operation. In his home office, surrounded by documentation of his thwarted efforts, to seek official help, Marcus began planning his next move. The system's failure to address his concerns wasn't just frustrating, it was informative. He now knew he was dealing with an organization powerful enough to control or influence every official channel he had tried to utilize. After exhausting all official channels, Marcus knew it was time to shift strategies. Drawing on his military intelligence background, he began implementing a carefully planned counter-surveillance operation. His first step was to expand his blockade in a way that would force Sentinel's patrols to reveal more about their true operation. Under the guise of landscape improvements, Marcus started installing additional security measures disguised as ordinary yard features. Solar-powered garden lights contained signal jammers that could selectively disrupt Sentinel's surveillance equipment. Decorative rock formations housed sophisticated counter-surveillance sensors. Even his new bird bath concealed a signal direction finder. The true genius of his approach lay in its perfect compliance with HOA regulations. Each new addition was meticulously documented and approved through proper channels, making it impossible for the board to object without revealing their real concerns. Every modification was designed to look completely innocent while serving a specific tactical purpose. Marcus timed his installations carefully, working during the day when the community was most active. He made sure to engage in friendly conversations with passing neighbors, maintaining an appearance of nothing more than an enthusiastic homeowner improving his property. This visibility was calculated. Any retaliation from Sentinel would now have multiple witnesses. The centerpiece of his strategy was what he called Project Echo, a sophisticated network of passive receivers hidden throughout his property. These devices didn't transmit anything, making them virtually undetectable, but they collected detailed data about all electronic surveillance activities in their vicinity. Each receiver was disguised as common yard equipment, sprinkler controls, motion sensor lights, or garden speakers. To further complicate Sentinel's operations, Marcus began varying his daily routine unpredictably. Some days he would leave, early, others late. Sometimes he would appear to leave, but actually remain in his hidden observation post. This forced the security teams to waste resources trying to maintain their surveillance schedule. His strategic positioning of new landscaping features created dead zones in Sentinel's surveillance network. These blind spots were carefully calculated to force their patrols to either abandon certain monitoring positions or expose themselves by attempting unusual maneuvers to maintain coverage. Either way, their reaction would provide valuable intelligence about their priorities. The effectiveness of his countermeasures became apparent when he noticed increased frustration among the security personnel. Parker, in particular, began making mistakes. During one patrol, Marcus observed him spending several minutes adjusting what appeared to be surveillance equipment, clearly struggling with signal interference. Mitchell's patrols became more frequent but less predictable, suggesting they were trying to compensate for gaps in their electronic monitoring. Marcus also implemented what he called the digital smokescreen, generating large amounts of meaningless, encrypted data traffic that would overwhelm Sentinel's monitoring systems. This fake traffic was designed to mask any real communications, while forcing them to waste resources trying to decrypt meaningless data. The psychological aspect of his strategy was equally important. Marcus made sure to wave pleasantly at every security patrol, maintaining a facade of friendly ignorance. This forced them to maintain their cover as ordinary security guards while knowing their surveillance operation was being systematically dismantled. One particularly effective element was his installation of mirrored privacy film on all his windows. The film made it impossible for surveillance teams to see inside, while simultaneously making it obvious when they attempted to do so. The psychological impact of watching their own reflections as they tried to peer into his home was noticeably affecting the guards' morale. Dr. Chen, observing from her property, provided regular updates about changes in patrol patterns around her home. These observations helped Marcus adjust his countermeasures for maximum effectiveness. The security teams were now spending so much time dealing with his disruptions that their surveillance of other residents was becoming noticeably less intensive. By the end of the week, Marcus's property had been transformed into what military intelligence would call a denial zone, an area where surveillance was effectively impossible without obvious and documentable violations of privacy. Every attempt by Sentinel to maintain their monitoring operations now required them to either break their cover or abandon their efforts. The final touch was a series of subtle booby traps, completely legal and harmless, but highly effective. Motion-activated sprinklers that would suddenly activate when someone lingered too long in certain areas. Solar-powered lights that would brilliantly illuminate anyone attempting to approach his windows at night. Even his garden hose was strategically placed to become a trip hazard for anyone trying to access certain monitoring angles. As he observed the growing frustration of the security teams from his command center, formerly known as his home office, Marcus knew his strategy was working. He had effectively turned his property into a black hole in their surveillance network, and their increasingly aggressive attempts to regain control were revealing more about their operation than any amount of direct investigation could have. The first major breakthrough came during a rainy Wednesday night, when Marcus's counter-surveillance measures finally provoked a serious reaction. Around 2 a.m., his security system alerted him to movement near his property's eastern perimeter. Through his night vision cameras, he observed 3 figures in dark clothing attempting to reinstall what appeared to be surveillance equipment on the utility pole adjacent to his property. What made this situation particularly interesting wasn't just the late-hour activity, but the professional-grade equipment they were using. These weren't standard security cameras. Marcus recognized the hardware as advanced signals intelligence-gathering devices, the kind typically reserved for corporate espionage or government operations. More importantly, one of the individuals was Thomas Blackwood himself. Getting his hands dirty instead of sending subordinates, Marcus activated his exterior recording systems, capturing every detail of their operation. The team was using specialized climbing gear and working with practiced efficiency that betrayed military or intelligence training. Their attempt to restore their surveillance capabilities had forced them to expose their true level of sophistication. As he watched, something unexpected happened. Blackwood received a phone call that clearly agitated him. Thanks to Marcus's directional microphones, he caught fragments of the conversation. Deadline moved up. Board meeting tomorrow. Chen's audit findings. Can't let Reynolds disrupt the timeline. The mention of Dr. Chen's name and audit confirmed Marcus's suspicions about the broader scope of their operation. The team's work was interrupted when Marcus's motion-activated lawn irrigation system suddenly engaged, spraying them with water. This wasn't an accident. Marcus had specifically programmed this response, but their reaction was telling. Instead of the surprised jump of ordinary security personnel, they moved with tactical precision to defensive positions, revealing their professional training. In their haste to retreat, they left behind something crucial. A laptop bag containing what appeared to be standard security patrol equipment. However, Marcus's trained eye noticed it was actually a sophisticated mobile data collection unit. The device's serial number and manufacturing marks would prove invaluable for tracing its origins. The next morning, Marcus conducted a careful examination of the abandoned equipment. The laptop contained encrypted files, but its network configuration revealed connections to servers far beyond what a local security company would need. More importantly, he found a document that had been hastily deleted, but was recoverable, a partial list of targets within the community, including dates and types of information they were seeking. This discovery was complemented by an unexpected visit from Tommy Zhang, who had been up late gaming and witnessed the whole incident. "Mr. Reynolds," he said excitedly, "those guys weren't just installing cameras. They had some kind of device that made my internet super slow and my dad's secure work connection kept dropping." This confirmed that their equipment was actively interfering with residents' communications. Marcus spent the afternoon analyzing the recovered data. The target list included not just Dr. Chen and Judge Patel, but several other residents with access to sensitive information, a patent attorney, a pharmaceutical researcher, and a venture capital manager. Each entry had specific notes about their access to valuable data and optimal surveillance points around their homes. The technical specifications of their equipment revealed another crucial detail. The power requirements and transmission capabilities far exceeded anything needed for routine security monitoring. They were running a professional intelligence gathering operation, using the HOA security contract as cover. Later that day, Marcus received an unexpected call from Mrs. Foster, the HOA secretary. Her voice trembling, she revealed that she had overheard Blackwood in a heated argument with Claire Thompson. "They're planning something big at tomorrow's emergency board meeting," she whispered. "Something about finalizing phases and securing assets. They seem desperate to speed up their timeline." This information, combined with the equipment evidence and intercepted conversations, painted a disturbing picture. Sentinel wasn't just conducting surveillance. They were racing against some kind of deadline. Their aggressive response to his blockade suggested he had inadvertently disrupted a much larger operation. Marcus spent the evening compiling all his new evidence. The abandoned equipment, the recorded conversations, and Mrs. Foster's intelligence formed a compelling case. He carefully documented everything, creating multiple encrypted backups stored in secure locations. If Sentinel was planning something at tomorrow's board meeting, he needed to be prepared. As he reviewed the surveillance footage one final time, Marcus noticed something he had initially missed. During their hasty retreat, Blackwood had made a call using what appeared to be a secondary phone, a different one from his usual device. This suggested compartmentalized communications, another hallmark of professional intelligence operations. This night's events had provided more than just evidence. They had forced Sentinel to show their hand. Their sophisticated equipment, professional training, and obvious urgency confirmed that Marcus had stumbled onto something far more significant than overzealous security measures. The question now was, what was so important about tomorrow's board meeting, And why were they suddenly accelerating? Their timeline? The breakthrough that changed everything came the morning after the night surveillance incident. Marcus's encryption-breaking software had finally cracked one of the files from the abandoned laptop, revealing a series of internal emails between Blackwood and someone identified only as Operations Director. The communications referenced a project called Operation Lighthouse and mentioned specific properties within Oakwood Heights. Cross-referencing the mentioned addresses with his community directory, Marcus discovered something startling. Every property listed in the emails belonged to residents who held positions with access to valuable intellectual property or financial data. Dr. Chen's home was marked as Priority 1, with a note about Q4 audit schedules. Judge Patel's residence had annotations about merger approval timelines. While analyzing these documents, Marcus received an urgent text from Tommy Jang. "Mr. Reynolds, you need to see this. Dad's company laptop got hacked last night. He's freaking out." This wasn't a coincidence. The Zhang family's home was also on the target list, with specific mentions of Mr. Zhang's work on encrypted communication protocols. Marcus arranged to meet Tommy secretly at the community park, where the teenager shared more disturbing information. "Dad's been working on a new security algorithm for his company," Tommy explained, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Last night, someone tried to access his development server right after those guys were messing with their equipment near your house." This connection was crucial. Marcus pulled up the timestamp from his surveillance footage and compared it with Tommy's information. The attempted server breach occurred exactly 12 minutes after Blackwood's team had set up their new equipment, before Marcus's sprinkler system had forced them to retreat. Returning home, Marcus found an unmarked envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a USB drive and a note in Mrs. Foster's handwriting. "Found these files while organizing the HOA digital archives. Something's very wrong." The drive contained copies of board meeting minutes from 6 months ago, when Sentinel first bid for the security contract. The meeting minutes revealed something extraordinary. Sentinel's bid had been nearly triple the cost of other security companies, yet they had won the contract unanimously. More suspicious was a series of private addendums to the contract, authorized only by Claire Thompson, granting Sentinel unprecedented access to community infrastructure. Marcus's military intelligence training kicked in as he assembled the pieces. The excessive bid wasn't for security services, it was payment for something else. Sentinel was using their security contract as cover for corporate espionage, targeting specific residents with access to valuable information. A call from Dr. Chen provided the final piece of the puzzle. "I've been reviewing the financial records again," she said in a hushed voice. "The money trail doesn't end with Sentinel. It leads to a holding company called Lighthouse Ventures, which is owned by a major corporate intelligence firm. They're using our HOA dues to fund their spy operation." Marcus dug deeper into Lighthouse Ventures. The company had been incorporated just 2 weeks before Sentinel bid for the security contract. Its corporate structure was a maze of shell companies, but one name caught his attention. Alexander Crawford, a former intelligence operative turned corporate spy, was listed as a silent partner. The connection hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Crawford had been involved in several high-profile corporate espionage cases, always managing to avoid prosecution. His methodology was consistent: establish legitimate business fronts to gain access to targeted individuals, then exploit that access to gather valuable information. Further investigation revealed that several of the targeted residents in Oakwood Heights were involved in projects that would interest Crawford's known clients. Mr. Zhang's encryption work, Dr. Chen's audit of a major tech merger, Judge Patel's upcoming ruling on a patent dispute, all represented valuable intelligence targets. Marcus spent the afternoon documenting everything. He created detailed timelines connecting Sentinel's arrival with increased surveillance of specific residents. He mapped out the communication patterns between Sentinel's equipment and external servers. Most importantly, he established clear links between the HOA contract and Crawford's operation. As evening approached, Marcus received another urgent message from Mrs. Foster. Blackwood just called an emergency meeting with the board officers. Something about accelerating the timeline. They're meeting tonight at the community center. This was unusual. Unofficial board meetings were strictly against HOA bylaws. Using his home security cameras, Marcus observed board members arriving at the community center after hours. Their furtive behavior and the presence of unfamiliar vehicles suggested this wasn't a routine meeting. Through his directional microphone, he caught fragments of conversation that confirmed his worst fears. Crawford wants it done by Friday. Can't risk Reynolds exposing the operation. Prepare for full extraction. The pieces had finally come together. Sentinel Security wasn't just conducting surveillance. They were running a sophisticated corporate espionage operation, using the HOA as unwitting cover. His simple act of blocking their patrol route had threatened to expose their entire network. The morning after Marcus uncovered Crawford's connection, Sentinel Security launched their first major offensive. At exactly 7 a.m., a certified letter arrived from the HOA board. Inside was a formal notice of multiple violations, accompanied by a demand for immediate compliance and threats of substantial daily fines. The violations were creatively worded, targeting everything from his landscaping modifications to his security cameras. What made the letter particularly interesting wasn't just its timing, but its specificity. Several violations referenced technical details about his counter-surveillance equipment, thinly disguised as concerns about unauthorized electronic devices and signal interference with community safety systems. They had essentially admitted to monitoring his defensive measures while trying to force their removal. While Marcus was reviewing the letter, Claire Thompson appeared at his door, accompanied by 2 Sentinel guards he hadn't seen before. Their stance and bearing marked them as former military or law enforcement, likely Crawford's professional operatives rather than regular security personnel. "Mr. Reynolds," Thompson began, her voice carrying a practiced blend of authority and concern, "the board has received multiple complaints about your modifications. We need to conduct an immediate inspection of your property." The guards shifted slightly, positioning themselves to block potential escape routes, a tactical movement that didn't escape Marcus's notice. Marcus responded with careful precision, recording the entire interaction on his security system. "I'll need to see a warrant," he stated calmly, "or at least proper documentation of these alleged complaints." Thompson's expression flickered briefly. They hadn't expected him to know his legal rights so thoroughly. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Chen, who had been watching from her window. Her presence as a witness forced Thompson and her guards to maintain their cover as legitimate HOA representatives. "I was just coming to discuss the community garden project," Dr. Chen announced loudly, making sure neighbors could hear. "Is this a bad time?" After Thompson and her escorts departed, Dr. Chen revealed why she had really come. "They tried to access my home office last night," she whispered. "I caught them attempting to bypass my security system. When I confronted them, they claimed they were responding to a burglar alarm, but I never activated one. Throughout the day, reports from other residents confirmed an escalating pattern. Judge Patel's security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. The Zhang's internet service was repeatedly interrupted. Even Mrs. Foster found her office computer had been remotely accessed overnight. Sentinel was making aggressive moves against anyone they suspected of supporting Marcus. The situation took a darker turn when Marcus discovered sophisticated signal jamming equipment had been installed on utility poles surrounding his property. Under normal circumstances, such devices would be illegal, but Sentinel had classified them as critical security infrastructure in their contract addendum with the HOA. Marcus spent the afternoon documenting every new development, creating multiple backups of his evidence. He noticed increased surveillance activity around his home, not just from marked Sentinel vehicles, but also from unmarked cars that appeared regularly at strategic observation points. At 4 p.m., he received an urgent call from his bank. Someone had attempted to access his accounts using stolen credentials. Simultaneously, his credit cards were frozen due to suspicious activity. This was no coincidence. It was a coordinated effort to pressure him financially. The pressure continued to mount when his cybersecurity clients began receiving anonymous emails questioning his professional integrity. Several contracts were suspended pending investigation of security concerns. Crawford's organization was clearly attempting to isolate him professionally and financially. That evening, Marcus observed a team of Sentinel operatives methodically photographing every inch of his property's exterior. They were documenting potential entry points and blind spots, information that would be useful for a forced entry rather than routine security patrol. Just before midnight, his power was cut. This wasn't a general outage. Only his house was affected. Through his backup systems, Marcus watched as a Sentinel team used the darkness to install additional surveillance equipment along his property line. They were establishing a complete monitoring perimeter. The next morning, Marcus found a new notice taped to his door. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was a cease and desist letter from a law firm representing Sentinel Security, threatening legal action for interference with official security operations and endangerment of community safety. Reviewing his security footage from the past 24 hours, Marcus identified at least 3 separate teams conducting surveillance on his property. Their rotations were professional and coordinated, suggesting military or intelligence background. This wasn't just harassment, it was preparation for something more aggressive. As he compiled the evidence of their escalating actions, Marcus received a text from Tommy Zhang. "They're watching our house too now. Dad's worried about his project files." The message confirmed that Sentinel was expanding their pressure campaign to anyone they suspected of helping him. The direct pressure campaign began at dawn, with a coordinated series of actions clearly designed to break Marcus's resolve. First came the construction crews, allegedly there to perform urgent infrastructure maintenance. They set up equipment that just happened to block his driveway, effectively trapping his vehicle in the garage. When Marcus questioned their permits, they produced paperwork signed by Claire Thompson herself. While dealing with the construction situation, Marcus noticed something more concerning. A team of workers was installing new security lighting around his property, powerful floodlights positioned to shine directly into his windows. The installation was carefully documented as a community safety measure, making any attempt to remove or disable them a violation of HOA regulations. The psychological warfare escalated when Sentinel began using their newly installed speakers to broadcast security announcements at random intervals. The messages were technically community-related, but their timing and volume seemed specifically designed to disrupt sleep patterns. A classic intimidation tactic that Marcus recognized from his military training. By mid-morning, Marcus discovered that his mail delivery had been accidentally rerouted, his garbage collection suspended due to safety concerns, and his lawn service had suddenly cancelled their contract. Each service cited different reasons, but the pattern was clear. Sentinel was systematically isolating him from basic services. Dr. Chen arrived at his door looking worried. "They're getting to everyone," she whispered. "The board just announced a special assessment for security upgrades, $5,000 per household. Anyone who opposes it is being labeled a security risk. This financial pressure was clearly designed to turn the community against anyone questioning Sentinel's authority. The situation intensified when Marcus attempted to leave for groceries. 2 Sentinel vehicles immediately pulled up, their guards insisting on escorting him for his protection. Their presence was obviously meant to intimidate rather than protect, documenting his every move and making it clear he was under constant surveillance. Returning home, Marcus found a notice of mandatory security inspection scheduled for his improperty. The document claimed authority under obscure HOA bylaws to conduct a complete search of his home, including his office space. It was a transparent attempt to gain access to his evidence against them. The afternoon brought a new tactic. Sentinel began conducting training exercises in the street directly in front of his house. Guards in tactical gear performed aggressive maneuvers, their movements clearly choreographed to appear threatening, while maintaining plausible deniability as legitimate security training. Marcus's home office internet connection began experiencing technical difficulties. His backup systems revealed sophisticated cyber attacks attempting to breach his security. The attacks were professional grade, further confirming Sentinel's connection to Crawford's corporate espionage operation. Around 4 p.m., Judge Patel made his way to Marcus's door, looking troubled. "They're threatening to expose sealed court documents," he said quietly. "Documents that could affect pending cases. They're using my own professional obligations against me." This revealed how Sentinel was leveraging each resident's specific vulnerabilities. The pressure took an unexpected turn when Marcus's neighbors began receiving anonymous letters. The letters subtly suggested that his security measures were actually surveillance devices targeting their homes. It was a clever attempt to isolate him socially by painting him as the threat to privacy. As evening approached, Sentinel's patrols increased dramatically. Every time Marcus looked out a window, a guard was visible, taking photos or notes. Their presence was constant and obvious, a clear message that normal life would be impossible until he complied with their demands. The day's coordination and escalation proved that this wasn't just harassment, it was a carefully orchestrated campaign, designed by professionals. Each action was documented and technically legal, while creating maximum pressure and discomfort. Marcus spent the evening cataloging every incident, noting how each pressure tactic was designed to appear legitimate while serving a clear intimidation purpose. The construction, the lighting, the patrols, all were calculated to make his daily life increasingly difficult while maintaining a facade of proper security operations. Just before midnight, as Marcus reviewed his security feeds, he noticed something that confirmed the sophistication of their operation. The guard patrols had established a perfect observation web around his property. Any attempt to enter or leave, any meeting with other residents would be instantly noticed and documented. Tommy Jang managed to slip him a note during the chaos. "They installed something on Dad's work laptop. He's afraid they're stealing his project data." This confirmed that while focusing pressure on Marcus, Sentinel was still pursuing their original corporate espionage objectives. Mrs. Foster called from a burner phone, her voice shaking. "Crawford himself was in the office today," she whispered. "He's pushing for something called Protocol Omega. If you don't comply soon." Blackwood looked scared when he heard that. The mention of this protocol and Blackwood's reaction suggested their endgame might be more severe than simple intimidation. Marcus spent that night transforming his home into an impenetrable digital fortress. Drawing on his military and cybersecurity expertise, he implemented what he called Protocol Shadowbox, a comprehensive defensive strategy designed to turn Sentinel's pressure campaign against them. First, he upgraded his home security infrastructure. Every window was fitted with vibration sensors connected to a standalone system independent of the house's main power. The sensors were carefully calibrated to detect not just break-in attempts, but also any attempts to install surveillance devices. On the glass surfaces, in his garage, Marcus set up what appeared to be a simple workbench, but was actually a sophisticated counter-surveillance command center. Multiple monitors displayed feeds from hidden cameras strategically placed around his property, while specialized equipment monitored for electronic surveillance attempts. The entire setup was powered by a military-grade backup generator hidden beneath false flooring. The most crucial element of his defense was what he called the Ghost Network, a series of decoy wireless networks broadcasting meaningless encrypted data. These networks were designed to overwhelm Sentinel's surveillance equipment with useless information while masking his actual communications through a series of rotating secure channels. Dr. Chen helped by providing access to her home's network, creating a redundant communication channel that Sentinel couldn't easily monitor. Together, they established a mesh network connecting several trusted neighbors, allowing secure communication even if individual internet connections were compromised. Marcus installed specialized signal jammers disguised as ordinary household electronics. These devices created a protective bubble around sensitive areas of his home, making it impossible for Sentinel's equipment to penetrate without using obvious and legally questionable levels of power that would expose their true capabilities. The physical security was equally sophisticated. Every entry point was reinforced with virtually invisible but highly effective barriers. Window frames contained pressure sensors that would detect any attempt to remove or manipulate them. Door hinges were replaced with military-grade hardware that looked identical to standard equipment but could withstand significant force. In the yard, Marcus implemented what he called passive-aggressive landscaping. Motion-activated sprinklers were positioned to create overlapping fields of coverage, each capable of suddenly drenching anyone attempting to approach the house from unauthorized angles. The sprinklers were connected to their own water supply, making them immune to utility shutoffs. The psychological aspect of his defenses was carefully considered. Marcus installed bright motion-activated lights at ankle height around his property. These lights were positioned to temporarily disorient anyone attempting covert surveillance, while appearing to be simple landscape lighting to casual observers. He created what military strategists call a defensive depth, multiple layers of security that would force any intrusion attempt to expose itself long before reaching critical areas. Each layer was designed to appear innocent, while serving a specific security purpose. Tommy Zhang proved an unexpected ally in the electronic warfare aspect. The teenager's gaming expertise helped identify vulnerabilities in Sentinel's wireless surveillance systems. Together, they created a series of electronic countermeasures that could selectively interfere with Sentinel's communications without affecting legitimate neighborhood wireless traffic. Marcus established fallback positions throughout his property, seemingly normal areas that could function as defensive positions if needed. His garden shed contained backup communication equipment. The bird bath housed a cellular signal booster. Even his porch furniture was strategically positioned to provide cover while maintaining clear lines of sight. The crown jewel of his defensive setup was the digital tripwire system. Any attempt to breach his network would trigger an automated response, sending encrypted evidence packages to multiple secure locations. This ensured that even if Sentinel managed to compromise his systems, they couldn't prevent the evidence from reaching appropriate authorities. Late that night, Marcus tested his defenses by attempting to breach them himself. The results were satisfying. Every approach to sensitive areas triggered multiple overlapping responses. Any serious attempt to compromise his security would create such obvious disturbances that it would be impossible to maintain the facade of legitimate security operations. Mrs. Foster provided crucial intelligence about Sentinel's planned responses. They're bringing in specialized equipment, she warned during a secure call. Something about signal penetration and network isolation. This information allowed Marcus to adjust his countermeasures accordingly. Judge Patel, observing the transformation from his home, noted with grim appreciation how Marcus had turned seemingly innocent household items into a sophisticated defensive network. They won't be able to touch you without exposing themselves, he commented during a careful inspection of the setup. By dawn, Marcus had established what military professionals would recognize as a textbook example of asymmetric defense. Every attempt to increase pressure on him would force Sentinel to escalate their actions in increasingly obvious and questionable ways, while his responses would appear entirely reasonable to outside observers. The inevitable direct confrontation came sooner than Marcus expected. At precisely 9 a.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up to his driveway. From it emerged Thomas Blackwood, accompanied by a man Marcus instantly recognized from his research, Alexander Crawford himself. The appearance of Crawford signaled that Sentinel was shifting from pressure tactics to direct negotiation. Unlike Blackwood's previous aggressive posturing, Crawford's demeanor was smoothly professional. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, projecting an air of corporate authority rather than security enforcement. Behind them, Sentinel guards established a perimeter, making it clear this wasn't a casual visit. "Mr. Reynolds," Crawford called out, his voice carrying the practiced charm of someone used to high-stakes negotiations. "I believe we need to have a conversation about recent misunderstandings." He stood at the edge of Marcus's property, carefully avoiding stepping onto it without invitation, a subtle acknowledgement of the legal boundaries at play. Marcus activated his recording systems before stepping onto his porch. His military training helped him read the situation. Crawford's presence meant they were worried, but his relaxed posture suggested confidence in his position. 2 more vehicles quietly pulled up at either end of the street. Backup, professionally. "Positioned. What misunderstandings would those be, Mr. Crawford?" Marcus responded, maintaining his position on the porch. "The illegal surveillance, the corporate espionage, or perhaps the misappropriation of HOA funds to finance your operation?" The slight tightening around Crawford's eyes confirmed Marcus had scored a hit. Crawford's smile remained fixed as he gestured to the surrounding homes. "We provide a valuable service here, Mr. Reynolds. Community security is a serious matter. Sometimes that requires comprehensive measures." His emphasis on comprehensive was clearly meant to justify their surveillance activities, and I suppose those measures include stealing Mr. Zhang's encryption protocols or accessing Judge Patel's sealed court documents. Marcus watched as Blackwood shifted uncomfortably at the mention of specific targets. Crawford, however, maintained his composure. "You have an impressive background, Mr. Reynolds," Crawford continued, changing tactics. "Your skills are being wasted here. My organization could use someone with your expertise. The compensation would be substantial." The offer was delivered smoothly, but the threat underlying it was clear. Join us or face consequences. Marcus noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Dr. Chen had positioned herself at her window, documenting the entire conversation. Judge Patel had also emerged from his house, standing in his driveway within earshot. They were ensuring this confrontation had witnesses. "I'm not interested in helping you steal from my neighbors," Marcus replied firmly. He deliberately kept his hands visible, aware of the armed guards watching his every move. "And I have enough evidence of your operation to make things very uncomfortable for your organization." Crawford's expression hardened slightly. "Evidence can be such a fragile thing, Mr. Reynolds. Computers crash. Files disappear. Witnesses become unreliable." The threat was delivered with the same smooth tone, but its meaning was unmistakable. "Like Sentinel's financial records," Marcus countered. The ones showing payments to offshore accounts? Or perhaps the surveillance logs documenting your illegal data collection? Each revelation caused minute reactions among Crawford's team. They hadn't realized how much he knew. The conversation was interrupted by Tommy Zhang, conspicuously walking. His dog nearby, phone held up as if taking casual videos. Crawford noted the growing audience with barely concealed annoyance. His carefully orchestrated private confrontation was becoming increasingly public. "You're forcing us into an unfortunate position," Crawford said, his voice lower now. "We've invested considerable resources here. The board has already approved our next phase of security upgrades. Fighting this will only make things difficult for everyone involved." Marcus stepped forward slightly, maintaining eye contact. "I've already documented everything, Mr. Crawford. Multiple copies, multiple locations. If anything happens to me or any of my neighbors, it all goes public. I don't think your corporate clients would appreciate that kind of exposure." Crawford studied him for a long moment, likely weighing options. Finally, he reached into his jacket, causing Blackwood to tense, and withdrew a business card. "When you're ready to be reasonable, call this number. The offer won't remain open indefinitely." He placed the card on the sidewalk's edge. As Crawford and his entourage departed, Marcus noticed Mrs. Foster hurriedly walking past, deliberately dropping a folded note near his mailbox. The message was brief but alarming. "Emergency board meeting. Tonight, they're implementing Protocol Omega, whatever that is." Marcus watched the vehicles disappear around the corner, knowing this confrontation marked a turning point. Crawford's direct involvement confirmed the scale of their operation, but it also revealed their vulnerability to exposure. The question now was what Protocol Omega entailed, and how far they would go to protect their operation. The true nature of Protocol Omega became clear that night. Around midnight, Marcus's security systems detected multiple breaches of his perimeter sensors. Through his surveillance cameras, he observed teams of men in dark clothing methodically approaching his property from different directions. Unlike previous Sentinel operations, these individuals moved with military precision. This was no ordinary security patrol. The first sign of their real intentions came when his main power supply was cut. Seconds later, his backup generators' connection was also severed. Someone with intimate knowledge of his systems had planned this operation. However, Marcus's military experience had taught him to prepare for such contingencies. His core security systems seamlessly switched to a hidden tertiary power source, allowing him to maintain surveillance. Through his night vision cameras, Marcus watched as the teams attempted to disable his external security measures. Their movements were coordinated and professional, suggesting special operations training. This was Crawford's elite team, not the usual Sentinel guards. They were systematically working to create blind spots in his defense network. Text message flashed on his encrypted phone, Dr. Chen warning him that similar teams were positioning themselves around other problem residents' homes. Judge Patel reported unmarked vans outside his house, and the Zhang's security systems had gone completely dark. This wasn't just an attack on Marcus. It was a coordinated operation against everyone who had opposed Sentinel. Marcus activated his emergency protocols, triggering a series of pre-planned responses. His ghost network began broadcasting confusing signals, making it impossible for the teams to use their electronic detection equipment effectively. The motion-activated defensive measures created unexpected obstacles, forcing them to reveal their positions as they tried to avoid them. The situation escalated when one of the teams attempted to breach his garage. Their equipment was sophisticated, military-grade lock-breaking tools and signal jammers. But as they worked on the door, Marcus's hidden cameras captured clear images of their faces and equipment. Every move they made was being documented and automatically uploaded to secure servers. Through his directional microphone, Marcus intercepted fragments of their radio communications. Target is dark. Move to Phase 2. Crawford wants full access. Retrieve all storage devices. The mention of storage devices confirmed this wasn't just intimidation. They were after his evidence against their operation. A sudden movement at his back door caught his attention. Another team was attempting to disable his security cameras using specialized equipment. Their tools matched those used in professional corporate espionage operations, further confirming Crawford's involvement. But each disabled camera activated a hidden backup, maintaining complete surveillance coverage. The tension peaked when Marcus detected someone attempting to access his home network from a vehicle parked down the street. The attack was sophisticated, using advanced hacking tools to try to breach his cybersecurity defenses. But Marcus had prepared for this. Each attempted breach triggered additional security measures while gathering data about the attackers. Tommy. Zhang, monitoring the situation from his computer, sent an urgent message. "They're hitting everyone's networks. Dad's entire system just went down." This confirmed that Protocol Omega was a full-scale operation to eliminate all evidence of Sentinel's activities and silence any opposition. Around 2 a.m., Marcus observed a familiar figure directing operations from a command vehicle. Blackwood, himself, looking tense as he coordinated the teams. Unlike his usually confident demeanor, Blackwood appeared stressed, constantly checking his phone and speaking urgently into a radio. Something about the operation wasn't going according to plan. Mrs. Foster managed to send one final message before her communications were cut off. Crawford's implementing total information control. They're seizing all HOA records. Board members are being pressured to sign non-disclosure agreements. This isn't just about security anymore. The operation took an even darker turn when Marcus's cameras caught team members planting what appeared to be incriminating evidence around targeted properties. They were setting up residents to be discredited if they tried to expose Sentinel's activities. This wasn't just an attack. It was a carefully planned operation to destroy the credibility of anyone who might speak against them. As dawn approached, the teams began withdrawing, but Marcus knew this was just the beginning. They had revealed their true capabilities and intentions. Protocol Omega wasn't just about silencing opposition, it was a complete takeover of the community's information infrastructure. The morning light revealed the operation's physical evidence: damaged security equipment, disconnected utilities, and subtle signs of attempted breaches. But more importantly, Marcus had documented everything. Every team member, every piece of equipment, every attempted breach was now recorded and secured in multiple locations. What troubled Marcus most wasn't the attack itself, but its implications. Crawford's willingness to deploy such aggressive tactics suggested this wasn't just about one community. Oakwood Heights was likely a test case for a larger operation, with other communities already in their sights. The morning after Protocol Omega, Marcus initiated his own operation, Counterstrike. Echo. While Sentinel's teams had been focused on breaching his defenses, his systems had been quietly collecting crucial intelligence about their operation. Every piece of equipment they used, every technique they employed, provided valuable information about their true capabilities and intentions. Marcus began by analyzing the data from his network monitors. The attempted breaches had revealed IP addresses and digital signatures linking Sentinel's operation directly to Crawford's corporate espionage network. More importantly, their sophisticated hacking attempts had left digital fingerprints that could be traced back to other similar operations across multiple communities. Using his military intelligence training, Marcus created a detailed organizational chart of Sentinel's operation. The night's activities had exposed their command structure. From the tactical teams on the ground to Blackwood's coordination role, all the way up to Crawford's strategic oversight. Each level of their organization was now documented and vulnerable. Dr. Chen arrived early, bringing her forensic accounting expertise to bear on the new evidence. Together, they traced the financial connections between Sentinel's various shell companies, discovering a pattern of similar security contracts with other HOAs across the state. Each community showed the same suspicious payment structures and unauthorized surveillance equipment purchases. "They're not just targeting our community," Dr. Chen concluded, reviewing the financial trails. "This is a systematic operation to gather corporate intelligence from residential areas where key executives and professionals live. Oakwood Heights is just one node in a larger network." Marcus's counter-investigation took an unexpected turn when Tommy Zhang provided access to his father's compromised work laptop. The malware Sentinel had installed was sophisticated, but it contained coding signatures that matched known corporate espionage tools. This was definitive evidence of their true purposes. Judge Patel, still shaken from the night's events, contributed crucial legal insight. "What they did last night wasn't just trespassing," he explained during a secure meeting in Marcus's garage. "The coordinated nature of the attack, the specialized equipment, the attempted network breaches, these elevate their actions to federal crimes." Working methodically, Marcus compiled comprehensive dossiers on each member of the tactical teams. He'd identified his military contacts, helped match their methods and equipment to specific private military contractors known for corporate security work. Each identification added another layer of evidence against Crawford's organization. Mrs. Foster, who had managed to preserve crucial HOA documents before Protocol Omega, provided the final piece of the puzzle. Hidden in the contract amendments were references to other communities where Sentinel had implemented similar security upgrades. Each location corresponded to areas with high concentrations of corporate executives and technical professionals. By mid-afternoon, Marcus had assembled a detailed map of Sentinel's entire operation. Their surveillance network extended far beyond Oakwood Heights, creating a sophisticated intelligence-gathering system disguised as community security. The scale of the operation was staggering, but it also presented multiple vulnerabilities. Using his cybersecurity expertise, Marcus began probing these vulnerabilities. He discovered that Sentinel's surveillance equipment, while sophisticated, relied on centralized control servers. Their attempt to breach his systems had inadvertently revealed these servers' locations and security weaknesses. Working with Tommy Zhang's network expertise, Marcus created a program to track the data flow from Sentinel's surveillance devices. They discovered that the collected information was being routed through multiple servers before reaching its final destination, a private data center registered to one of Crawford's shell companies. Dr. Chen's analysis of the financial records revealed another crucial weakness: the complex network of shell companies Sentinel used to hide their operations also made them vulnerable to regulatory scrutiny. Each transfer, each contract, each equipment purchase created a paper trail that could expose their entire operation. Marcus spent the evening consolidating all this intelligence into what he called his nuclear option, a comprehensive exposure package that would reveal the full scope of Sentinel's operations to law enforcement, regulatory agencies, and the media. Every piece of evidence was carefully documented and cross-referenced. The package included surveillance footage of the night's operation, financial records showing illegal fund transfers, technical data proving corporate espionage activities, and personal identifications of key operatives. It was designed to completely dismantle Crawford's organization if released. As night fell, Marcus received an unexpected call from a former military colleague now working in federal law enforcement. "Your activity has attracted attention," his that friend warned. Multiple agencies are already monitoring Sentinel's operations. You're not the only one building a case against them. This information changed Marcus's strategic planning. He wasn't just fighting a local security company, he was potentially part of a larger federal investigation. His evidence could be the key to exposing not just Sentinel's activities in Oakwood Heights, but their entire national operation. The next phase of Marcus's counter-operation focused on building a robust network of allies and information channels. He began by organizing a secure meeting in his reinforced garage, carefully selecting attendees who had both the motivation and capability to help expose Sentinel's operation. Dr. Chen brought her complete financial analysis, including documentation of suspicious payment patterns that extended well beyond Oakwood Heights. Their financial network is like a spider web, she explained, pointing to complex diagrams. Every community they've infiltrated shows the same pattern of inflated security contracts and unauthorized expenditures. Judge Patel contributed crucial legal expertise, highlighting specific violations that would interest federal authorities. What they're doing crosses multiple jurisdictional boundaries, he noted. The corporate espionage, the misappropriation of HOA funds, the illegal surveillance, each aspect violates different federal statutes. Tommy Zhang proved invaluable in the technical realm. His gaming community connections had helped identify similar security operations in other upscale communities across the state. They're using the same network architecture everywhere, he explained, showing patterns of data traffic. All the surveillance data flows through the same control servers. Mrs. Foster arrived with a thumb drive containing crucial internal documents she'd managed to secure before Protocol Omega. They're planning to expand, she revealed. I found proposals for security contracts with 3 other communities, all in areas with high concentrations of corporate executives. Marcus coordinated these various threads of intelligence, creating what military strategists call a force multiplier effect. Each piece of evidence strengthened the others, building a comprehensive picture of Sentinel's operation that would be impossible to dismiss as coincidence or misunderstanding. The group was joined by an unexpected ally, Sarah Mitchell, the Sentinel supervisor, who had become increasingly uncomfortable with the company's activities. Crawford's pushing for more aggressive measures, she warned. They're not just gathering information anymore, they're planning to use it. Mitchell's inside knowledge proved crucial. She provided details about Sentinel's command structure, including the names of key operatives and the locations of their primary data processing centers. More importantly, she confirmed that Oakwood Heights was just one part of a larger intelligence-gathering network. Marcus established secure communication protocols for the group, using encrypted channels and dead-drop locations for physical documents. Each member was assigned specific roles based on their expertise, creating a well-organized resistance network within the community. Dr. Chen coordinated with other financial professionals in targeted communities, building a database of suspicious security contracts and unauthorized expenditures. This financial intelligence network began uncovering patterns of corporate espionage, extending far beyond their initial suspicions. Judge Patel activated his own network of legal contacts, quietly preparing the groundwork for potential legal action. His experience with federal cases helped identify which agencies would be most interested in different aspects of Sentinel's activities. Tommy Zhang and his father worked on documenting the technical aspects of Sentinel's surveillance network. Their analysis revealed sophisticated data collection systems disguised as routine security equipment in multiple communities, all feeding information back to Crawford's organization. Mrs. Foster continued her crucial role as an inside source, carefully documenting board meetings and maintaining copies of all official communications. Her position gave her unique access to information about Sentinel's future plans and operations. Marcus coordinated all these efforts from his command center, carefully organizing the growing mountain of evidence into clear, actionable intelligence. Each piece was catalogued and cross-referenced, creating multiple backup copies stored in secure locations. The network expanded further when residents from other communities began reaching out. They had noticed similar patterns of aggressive security measures and suspicious surveillance activities. Each new contact added another piece to the puzzle, confirming the scale of Crawford's operation. Sarah Mitchell's defection had created confusion within Sentinel's ranks. Other security personnel began questioning their roles, particularly after learning about the illegal aspects of their operation. This internal uncertainty provided valuable opportunities for gathering additional intelligence. By evening, Marcus had established a sophisticated counter-surveillance network spanning multiple communities. Each member played a specific role, from gathering evidence to maintaining secure communications. The network was designed to be resilient. No single point of failure could compromise the entire operation. As the group finalized their preparations, Marcus received another call from his federal law enforcement contact. "Keep building your case," his friend advised. "Multiple agencies are very interested in what you're uncovering. Just be careful. Crawford has friends in high places." This warning reinforced the importance of their careful documentation and secure communications. They weren't just gathering evidence. They were building a case that would have to withstand intense scrutiny and powerful opposition. Just as Marcus's network was solidifying its position, the official response to Protocol Omega began. 2 police cruisers arrived at his home early in the morning, followed by a detective's unmarked car. Detective James Morrison, a veteran of the local force, led the investigation with an air of practiced neutrality that immediately put Marcus on alert. "Mr. Reynolds," Morrison began, "we've received multiple complaints about your interference with community security operations. Sentinel Security has filed formal charges of harassment and obstruction." The detective's tone was professional, but Marcus noticed him studying the property's security measures with unusual interest. What made the situation particularly complex was the arrival of Claire Thompson and Thomas Blackwood, both armed with thick folders of documented violations. They presented a carefully crafted narrative painting Marcus as a disgruntled resident who had become increasingly paranoid and dangerous. "He's been threatening our security personnel," Thompson claimed, producing photographs of Marcus's defensive installations. These so-called landscaping features are clearly designed to interfere with legitimate security operations. Blackwood nodded in agreement, adding details about Marcus's aggressive behavior toward patrol officers. Marcus maintained his composure, aware that this was likely Crawford's attempt to use official channels against him. "Detective," he responded calmly, "I have extensive documentation of illegal surveillance activities being conducted under the guise of community security." He proceeded to show Morrison some of his less sensitive evidence. The situation took an unexpected turn when 2 FBI agents arrived on the scene. Agents Roberts and Chen introduced themselves as part of a task force investigating corporate espionage operations. Their presence clearly unsettled Blackwood, whose confident demeanor noticeably faltered. "This is a local matter," Blackwood protested, but Agent Roberts cut him off. "We have reason to believe this situation connects to several ongoing federal investigations." The agent's words caused Thompson to pale visibly, suggesting she hadn't known the full scope of Sentinel's activities. Detective Morrison found himself in an increasingly awkward position as jurisdiction questions arose. The local complaints against Marcus were being overshadowed by federal interest in Sentinel's operations. His professional instincts told him there was more to this situation than a simple HOA dispute. Dr. Chen chose this moment to arrive, carrying folders of financial documentation. "I believe these records might be relevant to your investigation," she said, addressing the FBI agents. The documents detailed the suspicious payment patterns and shell companies connected to Sentinel's operations. Judge Patel also made an appearance, his legal expertise adding weight to the situation. He carefully explained how Sentinel's activities violated multiple federal statutes, from illegal surveillance to misappropriation of funds. His presence and professional reputation helped shift the narrative away from local complaints. The morning's events took another turn when Sarah Mitchell arrived, having decided to fully break with Sentinel. She provided the FBI agents with internal documents detailing the company's surveillance operations and corporate espionage activities. Blackwood's attempts to discredit her were undermined by the precision of her documentation. Tommy Zhang contributed by demonstrating how Sentinel's security systems were actually sophisticated data collection tools. His technical explanation of their network architecture and data routing practices caught the FBI agents' attention, particularly regarding potential cybersecurity violations. As the situation unfolded, Marcus noticed unmarked vehicles positioning themselves around the neighborhood. Through his security system, he identified several of them as federal surveillance units. Crawford's organization was now under observation from multiple agencies. Detective Morrison, recognizing the shifting dynamics, began distancing himself from Sentinel's complaints. His questions became more focused on their activities rather than Marcus's alleged violations. Years of police experience had taught him to recognize when a simple complaint was masking something larger. Claire Thompson, seeing the situation spiraling beyond her control, attempted to withdraw the HOA's complaints. However, her hasty retreat only drew more attention to her role in approving Sentinel's irregular activities. The FBI agents noted her behavior with particular interest. By afternoon, the official presence in Oakwood Heights had grown significantly. Multiple agencies were now involved, each focusing on different aspects of Sentinel's operation. What had started as a local complaint had evolved into a multi-jurisdictional investigation. Marcus observed all this from his command center, carefully documenting every interaction. He noticed how Blackwood's attempts to maintain control of the narrative were increasingly desperate, especially as more residents came forward with their own evidence of suspicious activities. The day's events culminated in a series of official interviews, with federal agents taking statements from key residents. Each testimony added another layer to the case against Sentinel, while Marcus's careful documentation provided crucial supporting evidence. The breakthrough in infiltrating Sentinel's inner workings came from an unexpected source. Sarah Mitchell, now fully cooperating, provided Marcus and the FBI with access to Sentinel's internal communications system. Her security credentials were still active, offering an unprecedented view into the organization's operations. Using Mitchell's access, Marcus discovered that Sentinel's headquarters was far more than a simple security office. The building housed a sophisticated command center, monitoring not just Oakwood Heights, but several other communities across the state. Video feeds, data streams, and surveillance reports flowed continuously through their systems. They have dedicated analysts for each target, Mitchell explained, showing Marcus through encrypted files. Every resident with access to valuable information is profiled, their routines documented, their communications monitored. It's not just about physical security. They're building comprehensive intelligence files. The internal documents revealed another disturbing detail. Crawford had established a hierarchy of targets within each community. Residents were classified based on their access to corporate secrets, technical innovations, or financial information. The surveillance intensity was adjusted accordingly, with high-value targets receiving round-the-clock monitoring. Marcus used his cybersecurity expertise to delve deeper into Sentinel's networks. The organization's digital infrastructure was impressive, but their focus on data collection had left vulnerabilities in their internal security. Through these gaps, Marcus began gathering evidence of their entire operation. Dr. Chen's analysis of internal financial records exposed a complex money laundering operation. They're not just stealing information, she discovered. They're selling it to corporate competitors through a network of shell companies. The security contracts are just a cover for their real revenue stream. Tommy Zhang, examining the technical specifications of their surveillance equipment, found something equally concerning. Their systems are designed to intercept specific types of corporate communications, he explained. They're not just watching people, they're targeting particular companies and projects. The infiltration yielded another crucial discovery. Sentinel maintained detailed files on anyone who might threaten their operation. Marcus found his own comprehensive profile, including surveillance photos, movement patterns, and personal information. Similar files existed for Dr. Chen, Judge Patel, and others who had opposed them. More alarming was evidence that Crawford was planning to expand the operation. Internal memos discussed contracts with other upscale communities, each selected for its concentration of corporate executives and technical professionals. Oakwood Heights was meant to be just the beginning. Mrs. Foster, still maintaining her cover as the HOA secretary, provided crucial real-time intelligence about Sentinel's immediate plans. "They're getting nervous," she reported. "Crawford's ordering the destruction of sensitive documents. They know something's coming." Through Mitchell's access, Marcus observed increasing panic in Sentinel's internal communications. Orders were being issued to sanitize operations, remove surveillance equipment, and destroy evidence. The organization was preparing for possible exposure. The infiltration also revealed the true extent of Blackwood's role. Far from being just a security manager, he was Crawford's primary operational commander, coordinating intelligence gathering across multiple communities. His communications showed a detailed understanding of corporate espionage techniques. Marcus documented everything meticulously, creating secure backups of all evidence. He noticed that Sentinel's internal security was becoming increasingly erratic. As they tried to identify the source of the information leaks, their attempts to lock down their systems only created more vulnerabilities. The most valuable intelligence came from Crawford's own communications. His emails and messages revealed connections to corporate clients willing to pay premium prices for stolen information. These communications provided direct evidence of criminal conspiracy, carefully logged and archived by Marcus's systems. Judge Patel, reviewing the gathered evidence, confirmed its legal significance. "This isn't just corporate espionage," he noted. "These records show systematic criminal enterprise. The federal prosecutors will be very interested in these connections." As Marcus continued monitoring Sentinel's internal networks, he noticed increased activity around specific technical projects. The Zhang family's encryption work, Dr. Chen's audit findings, and several other residents' professional activities were being closely tracked. Each target represented valuable intellectual property or market intelligence. The infiltration operation reached a critical point when Marcus intercepted orders for Protocol Terminal, apparently Sentinel's emergency shutdown procedure. Crawford was preparing to eliminate all evidence of their activities, including the possible destruction of their entire surveillance infrastructure. This discovery forced Marcus to accelerate his timeline. The evidence needed to be secured and distributed before Sentinel could execute their cleanup operation. Every minute of access to their internal systems yielded more crucial evidence that could expose their entire network. The critical turning point came when Marcus uncovered Sentinel's master database. Hidden behind multiple layers of encryption, this digital vault contained the complete records of their surveillance operation. The files revealed not just what they had collected, but who they were selling the information to. Working through the night in his command center, Marcus methodically documented everything. The database contained detailed intelligence profiles on hundreds of residents across multiple communities. Each profile included surveillance photos, intercepted communications, and assessments of potential intelligence value. Dr. Chen, analyzing the financial records within the database, discovered direct links between Sentinel's intelligence gathering and suspicious stock market activities. They're not just selling information, she realized. They're using it for insider trading. Every major corporate decision they've intercepted correlates with significant market movements. The evidence became even more damning when Marcus found a folder labeled Executive Operations. Inside were detailed plans for expanding their surveillance network to other exclusive communities, each selected for its concentration of corporate executives and technical professionals. Oakwood Heights had been their pilot program. Tommy Zhang, examining the technical specifications in the database, found something equally disturbing. They've developed custom malware for targeting specific companies' security systems, he reported. Each piece is tailored to the remote work setups of different residents. They're not just watching people, they're actively breaching corporate networks. The database also contained Crawford's personal communications with various corporate clients. These messages detailed specific information requests, payment arrangements, and the exchange of stolen data. Each conversation was meticulously archived, providing a clear trail of criminal conspiracy. Judge Patel, reviewing the legal implications of the evidence, identified multiple federal violations. This goes beyond corporate espionage, he noted. They're engaging in racketeering, wire fraud, and securities manipulation. The scope of their operation makes this a major federal case. Sarah Mitchell provided crucial context for the database. Contents. Each surveillance target is coded by priority level, she explained. High-priority targets are monitored 24/7, with real-time reporting to Crawford's team. They're particularly interested in any communications about mergers, product launches, or strategic decisions. Mrs. Foster discovered references to herself in the database, detailed notes about her access to HOA records and her potential usefulness. In covering up their activities, similar profiles existed for other community officials who had unknowingly facilitated Sentinel's operation. The most shocking discovery came when Marcus found a section labeled Contingency Measures. These files detailed plans for dealing with residents who might expose their operation, ranging from character assassination to manufactured criminal evidence. They had prepared dirt on anyone they considered a potential threat. The database also revealed the true extent of their technical capabilities. Their surveillance equipment wasn't just collecting visual data, it was capable of intercepting Wi-Fi signals, mobile phone communications, and even capturing keystrokes from wireless keyboards. The sophistication of their operation exceeded anything Marcus had anticipated. Cross-referencing the data with Dr. Chen's financial analysis revealed another layer of criminality. Sentinel was using the stolen information to manipulate markets through a network of offshore accounts. Each major intelligence breakthrough was followed by suspicious trading patterns that had generated millions in illegal profits. Tommy Zhang found evidence that his father's encryption project had been specifically targeted. The database contained detailed technical specifications and progress reports, suggesting that Sentinel had already stolen significant portions of the development work. Marcus discovered that Crawford had maintained detailed records of every operation, possibly as insurance, against his own clients. These records included names, dates, and specific pieces of information that had been stolen and sold. It was a complete roadmap of their criminal enterprise. The database also contained profiles of federal investigators who had come close to exposing their operation in other communities. These files included surveillance photos and personal information about the agents and their families, clear evidence of their willingness to intimidate law enforcement. As Marcus compiled this evidence, he noticed increased activity in Sentinel's network. They were beginning to realize their database had been compromised. Emergency protocols were being activated, and orders were being issued to purge sensitive files. Working quickly, Marcus created multiple secure backups of the database. He established deadman switches that would automatically release the information to federal authorities if anything happened to him or his allies. Each copy was encrypted and stored in different locations, making it impossible for Sentinel to contain the breach. The evidence painted a picture of an organization far more dangerous than anyone had suspected. They weren't just conducting corporate espionage, they had built a sophisticated criminal enterprise that threatened the privacy and security of hundreds of families across multiple communities. The final confrontation began at dawn. Marcus's security systems detected multiple vehicles converging on his property, not just Sentinel's usual security teams, but what appeared to be private military contractors. Crawford himself led the operation from a command vehicle parked just outside the community gates. Through his surveillance network, Marcus observed teams taking up positions around his house. Their equipment and tactics were military-grade, far beyond anything a legitimate security company would possess. It was clear that Crawford had abandoned any pretense of operating as a normal security service. "They're setting up signal jammers," Tommy Zhang reported through their secure channel. "They're trying to isolate your property from all external communications." But Marcus had anticipated this. His systems were already routing through multiple, redundant connections, using the network he had established with trusted neighbors. Dr. Chen, monitoring from her home office, noticed unusual financial transactions occurring. "Crawford's moving large sums through their shell companies," she warned. "They're either preparing to run or gathering resources for something big." The urgency in her voice confirmed the severity of the situation. Marcus activated his full defensive protocols. Every piece of evidence they had gathered was automatically uploaded to secure servers, with copies sent to multiple federal agencies. If Crawford was planning to destroy evidence, he was already too late. Through his home's speakers, Crawford's voice suddenly crackled. They had hacked into his home's communications system. "Mr. Reynolds," Crawford announced, his tone professionally menacing. "This is your final opportunity to cooperate. Transfer all your files to our servers, and this ends peacefully." Instead of responding verbally, Marcus activated his countermeasures. The sophisticated jamming equipment Sentinel had set up suddenly became useless as his systems began broadcasting on randomly changing frequencies. Their attempt to isolate him had failed. Judge Patel, watching from his home, had already contacted federal authorities. "Multiple agencies are en route," he messaged securely. "Just hold them off for 20 minutes. But Crawford's team was already making their move, approaching Marcus's house from multiple angles. Marcus watched through his cameras as they attempted to breach his security measures. Each team encountered carefully planned obstacles, motion-activated sprinklers, blinding security lights, and strategically placed barriers. Their military precision was being disrupted by simple but effective countermeasures. Sarah Mitchell's inside, knowledge proved invaluable. "Crawford's getting desperate," she reported from her position near their command vehicle. "He's ordering them to use whatever force necessary. He knows the evidence you have could destroy everything he's built." The confrontation escalated when one of Crawford's teams attempted to breach Marcus's garage. The moment they touched the door, silent alarms triggered throughout the neighborhood. Lights came on in dozens of homes as residents began recording everything, creating too many witnesses for Crawford to control. Mrs. Foster, still maintaining her cover, provided crucial intelligence from the HOA office. "They're trying to authorize an emergency security protocol to clear the streets," she warned. "But I've already locked them out of the system. They can't use official channels to cover this up anymore." Crawford's frustration became evident in his next announcement. "You're interfering with official security operations," his voice boomed through hijacked speakers. "We have full authority to use necessary force to maintain community safety." But his words were being recorded and analyzed, providing more evidence of his true intentions. Marcus noticed Tommy Zhang's drone discreetly monitoring the situation from above, documenting every move Crawford's teams made. The footage was being streamed directly to federal authorities, making any attempt to deny their actions futile. The situation reached its climax when Crawford ordered his teams to breach Marcus's front door. The moment they approached, Marcus's full security system activated. Every light on the property blazed to full brightness. Cameras swiveled to capture every angle, and recorded evidence of their previous crimes began broadcasting to every device. In the neighborhood, "It's over, Crawford," Marcus announced through his own speakers. "Every move you make is being recorded and transmitted to multiple federal agencies. Your entire operation has been exposed." To emphasize his point, he projected some of their most damning evidence onto the front of his house, visible to everyone in the street. Crawford's reaction was immediate, but futile. "Pull back," he ordered his teams, but it was too late. Federal vehicles were already entering the community from multiple directions. His carefully constructed operation was crumbling in real time, exposed by the very surveillance techniques he had perfected. The neighborhood had become an arena of flashing lights and sirens as law enforcement converged on the scene. Crawford's teams, realizing they were now facing federal authorities, began to stand down. The professional facade of Sentinel security was finally shattered, exposing the criminal enterprise beneath. The aftermath of the confrontation unfolded rapidly. FBI agents swarmed Sentinel's command vehicle, securing Crawford and his top lieutenants before they could destroy any additional evidence. Blackwood, attempting to flee in a separate vehicle, was intercepted at the community gates by waiting federal officers. Marcus watched from his security center as the full scope of federal response became clear. Multiple agencies had coordinated for this operation: FBI, SEC, and several other federal departments. Each had a specific interest in different aspects of Sentinel's criminal activities. Dr. Chen's financial analysis proved crucial as federal investigators began seizing Sentinel's assets. "Every transaction, every shell company, every illegal payment is documented," she explained to the lead investigator. "Their entire money laundering operation is mapped out in detail." The evidence Marcus had gathered painted a comprehensive picture of corporate espionage. The FBI's cyber crimes unit was particularly interested in the sophisticated surveillance equipment Sentinel had deployed throughout the community. Each piece of hardware was carefully documented and seized as evidence. Tommy Zhang's technical analysis helped federal teams identify and disable Sentinel's remaining surveillance network. They had tapped into every major communication line. "In the community," he reported, showing the agents the extent of the infiltration. Even the streetlights were part of their monitoring system. Judge Patel worked with federal prosecutors to organize the evidence for multiple criminal cases. "The charges will include RICO violations, wire fraud, securities fraud, and numerous privacy law infractions," he explained. "Crawford's operation has given us everything we need for a solid prosecution." Sarah Mitchell's testimony proved invaluable. As a former insider, she provided detailed information about Sentinel's operations in other communities. "This wasn't just about Oakwood Heights," she revealed. "They had similar operations running in at least 6 other high-end neighborhoods." Mrs. Foster's preserved HOA records showed how Crawford had manipulated the community's governance to facilitate his operation. Each board meeting, each contract amendment, each security protocol had been carefully designed to expand Sentinel's surveillance capabilities while maintaining a facade of legitimacy. The FBI's search of Sentinel's offices revealed even more evidence. Hidden servers contained years of stolen corporate data, surveillance footage, and intercepted communications. The scale of their intelligence-gathering operation exceeded even Marcus's estimates. As federal agents conducted their investigation, residents from throughout Oakwood Heights came forward with their own stories. Each account added to the growing body of evidence against Crawford and his organization. The community's collective experience painted a picture of systematic privacy violations and corporate espionage. Marcus's comprehensive documentation proved crucial for the federal case. His military intelligence background had enabled him to collect and organize evidence in a way that clearly demonstrated the scope and sophistication of Sentinel's criminal enterprise. The SEC was particularly interested in the connection between Sentinel's surveillance operations and suspicious market activities. Dr. Chen's analysis had revealed how stolen corporate information had been used to make millions in illegal trades through offshore accounts. Tommy Zhang discovered that Sentinel had already begun deleting data from their servers when the raids began. However, his technical expertise helped federal investigators recover crucial evidence that Crawford had attempted to destroy. The investigation revealed that several HOA board members had been unwitting participants in Crawford's scheme. Claire Thompson, realizing the extent of her manipulation, provided additional testimony about how Sentinel had gradually taken control of the community's security infrastructure. Marcus's counter-surveillance measures had not only protected the community, but had also gathered crucial evidence about Sentinel's methods. Each attempt they had made to breach his security had been documented, providing prosecutors with clear examples of their illegal activities. As federal agents continued their work, Marcus received word that similar investigations were being launched in other communities where Sentinel operated. His exposure of their operation in Oakwood Heights had created a domino effect, threatening to bring down Crawford's entire network. The evidence package Marcus had assembled proved to be the keystone of the federal case. His methodical documentation of Sentinel's activities, combined with the technical, financial, and testimonial evidence from other residents, created an insurmountable case against Crawford's organization. By evening, federal agents had seized control of all Sentinel's local operations. Their surveillance equipment was being dismantled, their servers were secured, and their personnel were being detained for questioning. The organization that had seemed so powerful just days before was being systematically dismantled. The days following Sentinel's downfall brought a flurry of activity to Oakwood Heights. Federal agents continued their methodical investigation, interviewing residents and documenting the full extent of Crawford's surveillance operation. Marcus's home became an unofficial command center for coordinating with various agencies. Detective Morrison, who had initially investigated the complaints against Marcus, returned with a different perspective. "We had no idea about the scope of their operation," he admitted. "Your evidence has opened similar investigations in 3 other jurisdictions. Sentinel's network went far deeper than anyone suspected." Dr. Chen worked closely with federal financial investigators, helping them trace the complex web of transactions that had funded Sentinel's operations. "They weren't just stealing information," she explained during a briefing. "They were using it to manipulate markets, influence corporate decisions, and blackmail executives. The financial impact runs into hundreds of millions. The technical dismantling of Sentinel's surveillance network proved to be a massive undertaking. Tommy Zhang assisted federal cyber teams in identifying and removing hidden monitoring devices throughout the community. They had equipment in streetlights, utility boxes, even buried in garden beds, he reported. The whole neighborhood was essentially a giant listening post. Judge Patel coordinated with federal prosecutors to organize the mountain of evidence into manageable cases. "We're looking at multiple criminal enterprises," he explained to Marcus. "Securities fraud, corporate espionage, racketeering. Each aspect requires its own prosecution team. Your documentation is proving invaluable." Sarah Mitchell's cooperation with authorities revealed another layer of Sentinel's operation. They had similar surveillance systems in development for at least 12 other communities, she disclosed. Each target was chosen for its concentration of corporate executives and technical professionals. Oakwood Heights was just the beginning. Mrs. Foster helped federal agents understand how Sentinel had manipulated the HOA's governance structure. "They inserted themselves into every aspect of community management," she explained. "Security was just their cover for accessing resident information and installing surveillance equipment." The FBI's forensic team made a crucial discovery in Sentinel's local office. Hidden behind a false wall, they found a complete backup server containing years of surveillance data. This discovery provided direct evidence linking Crawford to numerous corporate espionage operations. Claire Thompson, facing her own legal troubles for her role in facilitating Sentinel's activities, began cooperating with investigators. "Crawford convinced us that enhanced security measures were necessary," she admitted. "We never questioned why a simple neighborhood security contract required so many unusual provisions." Marcus spent hours debriefing federal agents about his counter-surveillance measures. His military intelligence background had enabled him to recognize and document patterns that might have escaped notice. Each piece of evidence he had gathered filled in another part of the larger picture. The community itself was undergoing a process of recovery and reorganization. An emergency HOA meeting was called to elect new board members and begin the process of reviewing and revising security protocols. The atmosphere was one of both relief and determination to prevent future exploitation. Federal agents discovered that Sentinel's operation had compromised several major corporate developments: Mr. Zhang's encryption project, Dr. Chen's audit. Findings and numerous other sensitive business matters had been exposed. The impact on affected companies was still being assessed. The investigation revealed that several Sentinel guards had been unaware of the true nature of their employment. These individuals provided additional testimony about how Crawford had compartmentalized information, ensuring that most employees only saw a small part of the larger operation. Marcus received word that his evidence had triggered investigations into similar security operations across the country. Other communities with high concentrations of corporate executives were reviewing their security contracts, looking for patterns similar to Sentinel's approach. The technical analysis of Sentinel's surveillance equipment revealed sophisticated capabilities that exceeded anything legally available to private security firms. Tommy Zhang's expertise helped investigators understand how these systems had been used to penetrate corporate networks and steal sensitive data. As the investigation progressed, federal agents began returning seized documents and equipment to affected residents. Each item told part of the story of how Sentinel had systematically violated privacy and security throughout the community. The final piece of the aftermath came when Marcus received official commendation from federal authorities for his role in exposing the operation. His methodical approach to gathering and preserving evidence had provided the foundation for what was becoming one of the largest corporate espionage cases in recent history. 1 month after Sentinel's downfall, Oakwood Heights had transformed. The community gathered for its first regular HOA meeting since the crisis, this time in a spirit of renewal rather than confrontation. Marcus observed from his usual seat as residents discussed plans for a new, transparent security system. The physical remnants of Sentinel's operation had been completely removed. The intrusive floodlights, surveillance equipment, and monitoring stations were gone, replaced by a legitimate security system that prioritized resident privacy. The community had chosen a local security firm with verifiable credentials and transparent operations. Dr. Chen, now heading the HOA's finance committee, had implemented new oversight protocols. Every contract, every expenditure is now subject to multiple layers of review, she explained to the residents. What happened with Sentinel can never happen again because we've built safeguards into our financial system. Tommy Zhang and his father had turned their experience into something positive, developing a community-wide security assessment program. We're teaching residents how to protect their personal and professional information, Tommy explained. Security doesn't have to come at the cost of privacy. Judge Patel reported on the legal proceedings against Crawford and his organization. The federal cases are proceeding exactly as we hoped, he announced. The evidence Marcus gathered, combined with resident testimonies, has created an airtight case. Crawford's entire network is being dismantled. Sarah Mitchell had found a new role as a security consultant, helping other communities audit their security contracts for signs of potential exploitation. Her insider knowledge of Sentinel's operations had become invaluable in preventing similar schemes elsewhere. Mrs. Foster continued her role as HOA secretary, but now with a renewed commitment to transparency. Every meeting was recorded, every decision documented, and all records were readily available to residents. The atmosphere of secrecy that had enabled Sentinel's operation had been replaced by open communication. Marcus's home security innovations had become a model for the community. His emphasis on privacy-respecting security measures had inspired other residents to take a more active role in their own protection. Several neighbors had adopted similar systems, creating a network of mutual support and vigilance. The federal investigation had expanded far beyond Oakwood Heights. Crawford's operation had led investigators to similar schemes in other communities, resulting in a nationwide review of private security contracts. The case had become a watershed moment in corporate security oversight. Claire Thompson's replacement as HOA president, a retired cybersecurity expert named Robert Martinez, had implemented new governance standards. Our community's security is now based on consent and transparency, he declared. Every measure we take must balance safety with respect for privacy. The neighborhood's physical appearance had also changed. The aggressive security presence was gone, replaced by subtle but effective measures that preserved the community's welcoming atmosphere. Gardens flourished where surveillance equipment had once been hidden, and neighbors interacted more freely without the constant watching. Marcus found himself frequently consulted by other communities dealing with similar situations. His experience had created a blueprint for identifying and addressing corporate surveillance operations disguised as security services. His methodical approach to gathering evidence and building community support had become a case study in effective resistance. The Zhang family's encryption project, now secure from corporate espionage, had been successfully completed. Their experience had led to improved security protocols for remote work, benefiting countless other professionals working from home. Dr. Chen's audit expertise had helped establish new standards for community financial management. Her systematic approach to tracking Sentinel's illegal activities had become a model for other HOAs looking to protect themselves from financial exploitation. The community's experience had drawn attention from privacy advocates and security experts nationwide. Oakwood Heights had become an example of how residents could successfully stand up to corporate surveillance while maintaining effective community security. As the meeting concluded, Marcus reflected on how the community had emerged stronger from the crisis. The fear and suspicion that Sentinel had cultivated had been replaced by genuine cooperation among neighbors. People were more aware, more engaged, and more committed to protecting their shared interests. The final piece fell into place when the community unveiled its new security charter, drafted with input from all residents. The document enshrined principles of privacy, transparency, and resident control over security measures. It stood as a testament to the lessons learned and a safeguard against future exploitation. Marcus's role had evolved from lone defender to community advisor. His experience and expertise had helped transform Oakwood Heights from a target of corporate surveillance into a model of resident-driven security. The battle against Sentinel had created lasting changes in how the community approached questions of safety and privacy. As he walked home that evening, Marcus noticed neighbors chatting on their porches, children playing freely in their yards, and a general atmosphere of peace that had been missing under Sentinel's watch. The community had not just survived a crisis, it had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.